I arrive before the sun because the dead do not wait for daylight. The parking lot above the basement morgue is slick from overnight rain, and somewhere below the asphalt I can hear the sump pumps muttering. A steady, watery pulse that has become part of my morning soundtrack. My boots leave dark crescents on the concrete stairwell as I descend. In my left hand is the same stainless mug I've carried for years, filled with coffee, black enough to scald the throat awake. The basement air hits me in a wave, disinfectant cut with mildew and faint copper, like pennies pressed into damp paper. Fluorescent tubes hum and tremor overhead. One near the door flares and then steadies, the flicker so familiar I barely notice. The hall itself is narrow, its cinder block walls painted an institutional green that once meant clean, but now only signals neglect. Condensation beads in the corners, where the humidity has no escape. The only sound is my own tread and the low mechanical exhale of the refrigeration compressors. This is the part of the job I rarely describe in courtrooms, the quiet inventory before work begins. I walk the row of steel drawers, running a gloved finger along each seam, checking for frost, listening for any change in pitch from the cooling units. The ritual is older than my current post. I started doing it back when a single failed gasket ruined an entire homicide case. Routine protects evidence. Routine keeps chaos out. At the end of the row sits my small office, more storage closet than room, with a battered desk and a single chair whose squeak I know by heart. I set the coffee down, open my private logbook, and sketch. Rough vascular maps, the curve of a femur, whatever yesterday left unfinished. I'm not an artist. The lines are for memory and measurement. Under my breath I murmur Latin, vena cava, myocardium, corpus callosum, not because I'm romantic, but because the cadence steadies me. 18 years in this profession have taught me that death is reliable. Organs fail in predictable sequences. Cells starve, membranes break, and within minutes the body's electricity is gone. I have testified under oath to that certainty more times than I can count. I built my calm on it. The phone on the wall jolts me from that meditation. The sheriff's voice, rough with static, asking if I can take a body pulled from a flooded shack downriver. Middle-aged male, likely drowning. Routine, I think. But the part of me that still hungers for the unsolved straightens in quiet anticipation. Rain hammers the loading dock like fingers drumming impatience. By the time I push the steel door open, the coroner's van has backed in crooked tailpipe coughing white into the damp. Mara Jensen hops down first, jacket hood up, clipboard under one arm. "Morning, Doc," she says, which is generous. The sky has not admitted to morning yet. "One swamp special for your collection." We roll the gurney inside. The wheels complain at every grout line. Water trails behind us in thin, snaking streams, shining under the fluorescence. The body bag is slick with river silt and a dark vegetal smell I know too well. Rotting reeds and wet wood, with the iron tang of blood flattened beneath it. Flood victims carry their geography with them. I note the basics aloud for the tape because the habit keeps the mind straight. Male, estimated 40s to 50s, recovered from collapsed shack along the South Bend. Exposure 12 to 16 hours. Chain of custody from Sheriff Dalton, Yo5 42. The zipper gives its standard reluctant rasp. Inside, the man's clothing clings like seaweed. Plaid workshirt, denim dulled to slate. The face is swollen but traceable. Beard shadow softened by water. Fingernails with crescents of river mud. Skin the colour of old parchment where it isn't livid. ID? I ask. Wallet was mush, Mara says, pen-ticking boxes. We'll run prints if his hands haven't turned to pudding. She leans in and then flinches back from the smell. Still better than last July. Everything is better than last July, I say. I lift a hand and the ligature marks of clothing on skin leave wet outlines on my gloves. He has the bloated feel of waterlogging. A body's tissues drinking through every available surface after the heart stops. Drowning does not look like the movies, I tell the recorder, because people will keep believing otherwise if we let them. There is no graceful sinking. It's panic. Water enters the airway, laryngospasm, throat locks. Then the reflex fails. Lungs fill. For minutes, the body tries to be both fish and person, and it is neither. On the table, the stainless is a mirror until I cover it with a blue absorbent drape. I set the oscillating saw aside. We won't need it yet. For a drowning, the story lives in the soft organs. Classical music whispers from the small speaker in the corner. Strings counting off a calm I don't yet need but will. I mark the Y incision with a fingertip. Shoulders to sternum, down to the pubis. Incision, I say, and cut. Flood victims bleed thinly, a pinked water that slicks, not spurts. The skin gives with a soggy surrender. The subcutaneous fat is pale and slick. I reflect the flaps, clamp where needed. We look to lungs for froth, I narrate, to sinuses for sediment, to stomach for aspirated material. Heart size tells us if there was room for error before the river arrived. Mara stands to my left, handing instruments without being asked. She's good that way. If he coughs, I'm quitting, she mutters. He won't, I say, not unkindly. I place the sternal retractor and crank. The ribs lift with a soft creak, like an old door acquiescing. The thoracic cavity gleams, a map I know by heart. The lungs are heavy and mottled, their surfaces marbled with petechiae, those tiny hemorrhages that bloom when pressure rises and vessels burst. The heart sits sodden in its cradle, the pericardial sac distended with fluid. Classic, I tell the tape. Edema, froth in bronchi, water aspiration. I palpate gently, trace the course of the great vessels. The rhythm in my head matches the music. Anatomy is a score. You can stay on tempo if you've practiced. Then something under my gloved index finger flinches. It is nothing at first. A whisper of tension along the diaphragm. A small ripple, the way a sleeping dog's paw jerks at a dream. I go still. Postmortem movement happens. Residual calcium can make muscles posture. Stray currents can tease a twitch. It is a fact we use to quiet panicked new techs. Artifact, I say aloud, and to Mara, ignore it. Gladly, she says, but her eyes are on my hands now, not the clipboard. The lights overhead buzz, dip, and recover. The sump pump downslope thrums louder for 3 beats, then settles. I slit the pericardium and let the fluid spill to reveal the heart. It looks like every drowned heart, flaccid, slightly enlarged, the epicardial fat pale as candle wax. I lift it free with the heel of my hand to weigh in my palm before severing the aorta. It squeezes, not a full contraction. A single, precise clutch against my glove, the kind a person makes when testing a new stress ball. I have been grabbed by hearts before, brief spasms driven by rogue electrical whisperings lingering for seconds. But this is later than seconds. This is after the vessels have been clamped, after exposure, after the great power down that follows death. Mara hears the hitch in my breath. You good? Post-mortem excitability, I say, and defend the lie with context. Muscle fibers can twitch if calcium leaks from storage. It's a short circuit, like a porch light flicker after you kill the breaker. In simple terms, it shouldn't be meaningful. It is the body clearing static. That explanation has soothed juries and techs and once a priest. I watch. The heart lies quiescent again, heavy in my palm. The music ticks to the next movement. I sever the aorta, the pulmonary arteries, lift the organ free, set it in the tray for later dissection. Businesslike. This is the work. As I turn to the liver, a dark mass snug under the ribs, a new motion draws the eye. Subtle but directional. The slick edge of the right lobe noses forward, not sliding with gravity but nudging, like an octopus arm seeking purchase. My scalpel pauses midair. The cut I intend, a clean sweep to free the falciform ligament, does not happen. Doc? Mara says. The word is thin. Hold, I answer. The recorder is still running. The speaker's strings are too cheerful. I lower my face until the magnifying lenses bring the surface close. Fine grit of river silt in the capsule. Hairline tears from collapse. A tiny leaf vein of bile. And beneath that, a peristaltic suggestion. Wave following wave. That is a bowel's trick, not a liver's. The liver is a chemical factory. It doesn't move. It is the quietest of workers. This is not possible, I say, but I force the explanation because the rule is context before anomaly. Organs need oxygen to make ATP, that's energy, like fuel for a car. No fuel, no motion. Hearts are exceptional for a minute or two. Livers are not. I rest the scalpel. The liver edges again, angling toward the stump of the severed portal vein, as if remembering where it belonged. Mara's humor evaporates. Nope, she says softly, which is not a scientific term but is exactly correct. We are both still. The sump pump far away coughs and catches. The fluorescents mutter in their housings. Water from our tracks to the loading dock has already found the floor drain. In this room, time is supposed to move in one direction only. Forward, away from life. Yet under my hands the map I have trusted for 18 years redraws itself by a degree. I pick up the recorder and mark the time. My voice is steady because it has to be. Observation. Faint, coordinated motion in hepatic tissue. Directed toward vascular stump. Repeat. Directed. Then, to Mara, without looking at her. We switch to full documentation now. She exhales, relieved to be given something to do. Cameras, cameras, light meter, temperature log. I pause, watching the heart in its tray as if it might decide to weigh in, and keep the door closed. Storm will knock the Wi-Fi anyway, she says, mostly to say anything. When I look back at the liver, it is waiting, if an organ can wait, with a patience I have only ever granted the dead. The cut I did not make a minute ago feels suddenly consequential, a fork in a path I didn't know existed. I am careful with forks. I choose the branch I can live with. Observe first, cut later. Doc, Mara says again, from the cabinet where we keep the Nikon and the tape. You want the halogen or the surgicals? Both, I answer, because I suspect the room will need more light than we own. Because whatever this is, it intends to be seen. The first rule of a good postmortem is control the variables. If something you've built a career on begins to misbehave, you don't panic. You tighten the experiment until it has nowhere to hide. That was the thought that got me moving after the liver's impossible nudge. I started with light. The ceiling fluorescents have a habit of humming and stuttering when the storm pulls power. A bad ballast can turn shadows into phantoms. I wheeled the tall halogen exam lamp into place, its long arm arching like a curious bird over the table, and set a light meter just at the tray's edge. I wanted lux readings minute by minute. Light illusions die under measurement. Next came the cameras. My phone in wide-frame video mode, its lens steady on a tripod, and the morgue's battered Nikon for stills. I taped a thin line of black electrical tape across the stainless table to create a fixed visual baseline. Any shift, however slight, would register against it. Beside the cameras I placed a digital thermometer and an old-fashioned mercury backup. Storms make electronics lie. Glass rarely does. Mara watched me build the rig with an expression that hovered between respect and unease. "Protocol again?" she asked, voice pitched low. "Always protocol," I said. Saying it out loud steadied me. We narrate to prove we're still in control. I hit record on my laptop's audio log. Case HC77 flood. Controlled observation of anomalous postmortem tissue movement. Time 0, 07:18. My own voice came back through the tiny speaker a beat later. Flat. Professional. I explained for the record, and for whatever jury or disciplinary board might one day listen, why this could not be real. Dead cells lack adenosine triphosphate, ATP, which fuels contraction. Without oxygen and intact membranes, motion ends within minutes. Any residual twitch is random depolarization, not coordination. The heart in its tray did not twitch while I spoke. The liver lay quiet. For a time the room felt ordinary again. Halogen glare, stormwater gurgling somewhere under the floor, Mara's soft paper towel sounds as she wiped puddles near the drain. Routine is a balm. At 07:42, the heart changed everything. It began as a single, deliberate squeeze, not the jitter of calcium leak, but a full, rolling contraction you can feel in the glove. Then another. I lifted it into the light. It beat again. weak but rhythmic. Lub pause dub, like a bird struggling to remember flight. Recording event, I said, but my voice betrayed a tremor. Sustained myocardial contraction without perfusion. In lay terms, a dead heart was beating on the table. Mara's breath hissed. That's not possible, right? Not without energy, no. I forced myself into teacher mode because explanation keeps terror from metastasizing. Cardiac muscle cells require electrical depolarization and intact ion gradients. These died hours ago. The halogen reflected off slick pericardial fat as if mocking me. This should be inert as shoe leather. The beat continued, uneven but undeniable. I measured rate, 28 per minute, and amplitude with calipers, as if numbers could cage it. The thermometer read 60 degrees ambient, 64 at the heart surface. Warmth where no metabolism should exist. I tried stimuli. Gentle probe with forceps, a light tap, a tiny saline drip. Each provocation triggered an unmistakable quiver, as though the organ sensed contact. The movement was not random. It turned fractionally toward its severed vessels, mouth seeking throat. Mara whispered, "Jesus," but didn't move closer. Her jokes were gone. Outside, the storm deepened. The sump pumps thudded with each surge. Somewhere water slapped metal. Cell service died fully. My phone blinked. No signal. The basement felt suddenly cut off, like a submarine sinking at 0805. Vascular sprouts appeared. It started at the torn aorta, pale strands emerging, thread-like but organized, reaching for the severed hepatic vein across the tray. I've seen angiogenesis under a microscope. Tumors do it. But this was visible to the naked eye, tendrils weaving as ivy does toward light. Arterial extension observed, I narrated, and then for any layperson later forced to hear this. Blood vessels grow only in living tissue. Dead endothelium does not build new tubes. This is vines looking for a trellis. Mara gagged softly and turned away. Doc, stop. I shook my head. Data first. By 0820 the liver responded. Its edge undulated toward the questing vessel. Peristaltic waves, gentle but purposeful, rolled across the parenchyma. It wanted to plug back in. I checked all instrumentation. Temperature steady. Light stable at 980 lux. No table vibration. My own pulse pounded louder than the pumps. The more impossible it became, the more I clung to notation. Degrees, millimeters, timestamps. Numbers were a lifeline. Storms climbing, Mara said finally. Water sloshed somewhere close. The drain smell sharpened. If this place floods... It won't, I lied. The thought of abandoning the table, of not seeing where this went, was worse than the fear crawling up my spine. At 8:37, the event escalated. A sudden collective shuffle. Heart, liver and lungs. I hadn't even excised the lungs yet, but they flexed within the open chest. All edged closer together, like magnets finding alignment. The heart lurched an inch toward the mediastinum it had once filled. Tubes of vessels sought socket. Even the intestines, pale ropes coiled at the peritoneal edge, gave a sluggish, serpentine inch. I heard Mara's clipboard hit the floor. Nope. No. Doc, this is... Her voice cracked, then failed. Marking time, I forced out, throat dry. Coordinated systemic movement. Approximate displacement. 2 to 3 centimeters. I wanted to keep my voice level, but it shook. For the first time in 18 years, I felt the idea that death is safe slip from my grasp. The fluorescence flickered with the storm's next surge. Shadows strobed across the organs. Slick, glistening, half-built life in harsh gold. I steadied the camera, checked focus, kept talking, because silence would mean surrender. Observation continues. Hypotheses exhausted, Mara stepped backward until she touched the far wall. Doc, it's trying to come back. Her words hung heavy, childlike in their terror, but truer than anything I could draft. I stared at the reaching tissue and felt, under the scientific panic, a deeper fracture. If parts can remember the whole, if death is just negotiation rather than end, Then every autopsy I've ever signed was a convenient fiction. I told myself, collect data. That's all. But some quiet animal part of me whispered that we were not the observers anymore. We were the observed. I wrote the last note of the hour with a hand that shook hard enough to smear graphite. Coalescence noted. Magnitude unknown. Further observation required. And then, because the heart beat once more, strong enough to jolt the tray, I did what I have never done mid-case. I looked away. The only thing more dangerous than an impossible event is curiosity that survives it. I should have ended the exam when the heart lurched toward its own vessels. I should have called the state path lab, logged the body as unstable, and walked away. Instead, I brewed a second cup of coffee, wiped my shaking hands on a towel, and told myself that a better experiment would conquer fear. I set the Nikon to time-lapse and adjusted the halogen lamp to a steadier beam. The storm still hammered the drainage pipes, making hollow underwater knocks echo through the floor. The morgue smelled of damp concrete and copper, the faint metallic tang of blood long rinsed but never forgotten. My hands moved by rote, slide samples, prep glass slides, mark times in my log. Action keeps dread from solidifying. I cut a sliver from the twitching liver and another from the ventricle wall, placed each beneath a cover slip, and slid them under the microscope. Cellular death is something I've narrated 100 times. Membranes rupture, mitochondria swell and leak, nuclei fragment. It's one of the most dependable truths in pathology. The tiny clocks of life all stop when oxygen vanishes. That's why what I saw next felt like betrayal. Under 400x magnification, hepatocytes, liver cells, were dividing. Slowly, irregularly, but undeniably splitting like living tissue. Their membranes shimmered with activity, pseudopodia stretching and retracting like time-lapse roots. I whispered the term mitosis, then explained aloud for the recorder. Cell division observed. Postmortem interval estimated 12 hours. This is biologically impossible. Cells die within minutes of hypoxia. Mara leaned over my shoulder, her breath hitching when she saw the wriggling shapes. Tell me that's some kind of artifact. Could be contamination, refraction. My voice sounded hollow. But no. The truth settled like cold water down my back. This is life where there shouldn't be any. I kept working. More samples, heart, lung, kidney. Each showed erratic but real metabolic motion. Cytoplasm swirling, membranes budding. The slides pulsed faintly, an illusion maybe, but enough to make my stomach drop. A sudden flicker plunged us into brief darkness as the lights fought the storm. The emergency battery kicked in half a second later, painting the room orange. In that instant of blackness, I swore the heart moved closer to the liver by another inch. Mara swore out loud, scrambling back until her hip hit the cold drawer wall. "You saw that," she hissed. "Perception under stress can—" I began, then stopped, because I had seen it. I reached out with my gloved hand to steady the heart, fingers pressing gently against cool myocardium. And then everything broke. For a heartbeat, my heartbeat, I wasn't in the morgue. I was in black, rushing water. Mud pressed against my teeth. My lungs burned, swelling with liquid cold as knives. I felt arms thrashing, nails scraping wood, an animal panic to breathe where no air lived. The body's memory flooded me, intimate and merciless. The heart under my palm pounded, but it wasn't mine. I jerked my hand back as though burned. The morgue returned with a snap. Halogen glare, storm noise, Mara's pale, horrified face. My own chest heaved. I coughed up nothing but air. The heart stilled for a moment, then resumed its weak, eager contractions, as if pleased I'd listened. Mara's voice was small. "Doc, what just happened?" I wanted to say syncope, stress hallucination, some neurologic misfire, but my legs trembled. "Memory," I whispered before I could stop myself. It showed me dying. That's not possible. Her denial was a lifeline she threw both of us. Memories in the brain, neurons, you taught me that. "It should be," I said. "Tissue doesn't hold stories." My throat felt raw. But it just told one. She stared at the organs, then at me. "We need to stop," I almost agreed. Instead, the empiricist, The man who believed death was data clawed back control. Science first. Document. Mara's laugh was thin, on the edge of tears. You're insane, maybe, but we finish. I added new slides to the scope. Under the lens, cardiac muscle fibrils waved like grass in unseen current. Lymphocytes crawled. No electricity, no oxygen, yet motion. My voice on the recorder trembled but kept teaching. Memory is thought to reside in synapses. This suggests distributed encoding, if true. I swallowed. If true, death is not erasure. It's rebellion. At 09:22, the stomach spasmed, a sudden, serpentine twist that sloshed preserved fluid onto the tray. Intestines followed, writhing sluggishly, seeking connection. Mara shouted and stumbled back, clanging against the metal refrigerator doors. Her usual farm girl stoicism cracked. She looked ready to bolt. I grabbed preservative, strong fixative, and sprayed the twitching mass. It hissed faintly on contact but didn't halt the movement. The smell, sharp aldehyde over copper and mildew, filled the room. "Stop," she pleaded. "Doc, please." Enough, but I couldn't. The rational part of me was gone, replaced by raw obsession to see how far death could trespass. Thematic dread seeped in, quiet but profound. If tissue remembers, if pieces try to rebuild, then what am I but a sum of mutinous parts waiting to reassemble? My certainty, my shield, cracked further with every twitch. Another surge of light failure plunged us into 2 seconds of black. In that silence I heard a sound I cannot explain, a wet, deliberate drag, as if the organs were crawling en masse. When the light returned, the heart and liver were nearly touching. Vessel tips brushed, like fingers almost clasping. Mara sobbed once, then clamped her mouth. "Doc, it's alive." "It's not alive," I said automatically, though I no longer believed it. Life is metabolism. This is something else. What else? I had no answer, only awe and fear. Water gurgled loudly in the floor drains, a reminder the storm was winning. I imagined floodwater rising, carrying this reassembling thing with it through the dark corridors, organs hunting each other until whole again. At 09:35, the body, if you could call it that, shifted collectively. Heart thumping, liver sliding, intestines coiling. Magnetic, purposeful. My notes disintegrated into scribbles. I tried to speak calm for the record. Systemic coalescence continues. Unknown driver. Hypothesis exhausted. My voice was almost a whisper. Mara pressed herself to the far wall, face pale. "Doc, it's aware of you." The words landed like a verdict. I felt it too, a subtle tug, as if my own pulse was a beacon. Whatever principle moved this flesh wanted me. That was the first whisper, not sound, but intention. A thing with no brain leaning toward me, asking to be whole, to live again, and maybe to use me to finish its story. I closed the logbook with a snap because my hands shook too much to write. The halogen flickered, casting slick shadows on the almost body. Somewhere in the pipes, storm water roared closer, and for the first time in my 18-year career, I wondered if staying was a mistake I wouldn't survive. The sump pumps failed just after midnight. I didn't notice at first. The storm outside had been drumming for hours, a constant percussion beneath the morgue's low ceiling. But then the sound changed, a low, wet gurgle from the drains, followed by silence. The silence felt heavier than the roar. I looked up from the logbook, where my notes had devolved into frantic sketches of vessels reaching across stainless steel. Water began to seep in around the floor grates, thin silver fingers stretching toward the autopsy table. Mara cursed softly. "Doc, the pumps?" I didn't answer. The organs on the table had started to move again. Not twitch, move. The heart gave a deliberate shuddering beat, then another. The liver rolled slightly toward it, intestines sliding like slow snakes. In the flicker of the overhead lights, everything seemed to inch closer, as though drawn by a tide I couldn't feel, but could somehow sense in my own chest. My pulse was matching theirs. I forced my voice into the recorder, but it came out ragged. "Death is cellular collapse. This is construction. The lights failed entirely. A heartbeat of darkness. Then the backup kicked in. Dim emergency bulbs cast the room in burnt orange. Shadows stretched long across the wet floor, jagged and trembling. The body, or what was trying to be one, writhed in stop-motion jerks, each contraction wet and purposeful. Mara backed toward the steel door, eyes wide. "We have to leave, now." The door's red emergency lock light glowed faintly, but didn't disengage. Flood sensors had tripped it. Water was already lapping against my boots. "We can't," I said, though part of me wanted to run more than I ever had in my life. I wasn't thinking like a survivor. I was thinking like a scientist desperate to know how far the impossible could go. The heart beat harder, a dull, wet thunk, thunk, thunk that seemed to echo from everywhere. Strands of vessel sprouted from its base, thin crimson vines wriggling toward nearby tissue. The liver quivered and bled new threads of connection. It was building itself, Mara sobbed once. "Doc, it's alive." "Not alive," I said reflexively, but my voice was shaking. "Life needs a brain, nerves, circulation." I swallowed hard. "This is something else." The thing didn't care about our definitions. The stomach contracted, vomiting dark fluid that stank of river mud. The intestines looped upward, questing blindly. Muscle twitched in patterns that looked too much like crawling. Each piece sought the others. I stepped closer despite the tremor in my knees. Science had always been my weapon against fear. If I could name it, maybe I could own it. I reached out, foolish, reckless, and touched the heart. It was like plunging my mind into water. I wasn't me anymore. I was lungs filling, ribs cracking, river swallowing screams. I saw a shack collapse under brown floodwater, felt nails tear against splintering boards. Cold ripped through me until there was nothing but the need to breathe and the certainty that breathing would kill me. The heart's panic was mine. Its death was mine. I wrenched my hand away, gasping. The morgue swam back into focus, lit by sputtering orange bulbs and the dull gleam of floodwater spreading across tile. My gloves were wet, but with what I couldn't tell. "Doc!" Mara's voice snapped me back. She was pale, shaking, but she had a crowbar from the supply cabinet and was beating at the emergency door lock. "We're getting out." "Wait," I croaked, still half drowning in someone else's final moments. "It's showing me. I don't care what it's showing," she screamed. "It wants you." She was right. The pull was unmistakable now. A magnetic yearning in the twitching flesh. A sense that if I stepped closer, it would find completion in me. Not infection, integration. The organs convulsed in unison, a grotesque choreography. Bloodless, yet somehow alive, they heaved toward each other. Vessels lashed out like cables, snagging and knitting. A rough shape emerged, torso arching, spine curling upward, ribs seeking ribs. The heart anchored at its center, pumping weakly but insistently. I narrated through clenched teeth, because if I stopped talking, I might scream. Systemic reassembly, autonomous, death resistance beyond metabolic baseline, tissue memory, driving reconstruction. Mara pounded the door. "Doc, please!" I glanced back. The water was ankle deep now. A floating scalpel bumped my boot, and then the thing moved with intent. No eyes, no face, yet I knew it saw me. The unfinished body shifted upright on the table, skeletal framework half-formed, muscles twitching across bone like worms knitting fabric. It turned, not with a head, but with every fibre, toward me. For the first time in 18 years of cutting into silence, I felt terror, raw and absolute. I understood, in that breathless second, that my entire career had been arrogance, believing death would stay where I put it. Mara screamed. The crowbar finally bit into the door lock with a metallic snap. The room tilted, my ears filled with the roar of imagined floodwater again, or not imagined. My lungs seized as though the river had found me across time. The creature's intent wasn't just to rebuild itself. It was trying to finish dying through me. My cells sparked with alien memory. My heart skipped and stumbled in rhythm with the one on the table. "No," I whispered, staggering back. "I am not yours." A klaxon blared overhead. the hospital's flood alarm. The sudden surge of power tripped the circuits. Lights exploded white, then died to black for a breathless instant. In that void, something wet slapped the floor near my feet. When light returned, the nearly formed body convulsed. Vessels recoiled, muscles seized. It collapsed in on itself, the parts breaking apart like a puppet with its strings cut. The heart gave one more tremor, then lay still. A dark, glistening stone on the table. Silence, broken only by the slow rise of water and my own ragged breathing. Mara shoved the door open and grabbed my arm. "We're going, now." I couldn't move at first. My legs were numb, my chest still echoing with someone else's drowning. The morgue smelled of formaldehyde and wet earth, and behind it, something raw, like the breath of a living thing that had almost been born. "Doc," she snapped. "Come on." I stumbled after her, water sloshing around our boots, the emergency lights flashing as if unsure whether to die or hold on. At the doorway I looked back one last time. The organs lay scattered again, inert, silent. But they weren't as I'd left them. They'd fallen in an unmistakable human silhouette, as if mocking the idea of stillness. I turned away before it could change again. By dawn, the pumps would clear the water, and the morgue would look almost normal, but I would know, in every shaking breath, that I had watched death reach across its own boundary and try to pull me in, and I would still have to write a report that made it sound like nothing happened at all. By the time daylight seeped through the stairwell door, the basement morgue was almost itself again. The pumps had finally caught up with the flood. Their low mechanical thrum was steady, familiar, almost comforting. Water had retreated to thin puddles that reflected the humming fluorescent tubes overhead. Someone from facilities had restarted the power. Half the lights were still flickering, but at least the emergency bulbs had gone dark. I stood alone at the autopsy table, soaked scrubs clinging to my back, stainless instruments scattered in disarray. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the table edge to steady them. The organs were back to their proper, lifeless arrangement. Heart, lungs, liver, intestines, cold and motionless, glistening under the harsh light. Only the faint irregularity of their placement betrayed what had happened. A human silhouette, now broken apart by my own shaking adjustments. I forced myself to clean the table first. It's what you do after chaos. Return to procedure. I rinsed, bleached, restacked trays. Each clang of stainless steel echoed too loud in the quiet, and each echo made me flinch. My gloves were slick with water and sweat, and I couldn't tell which was worse, the thought of touching them barehanded, or the knowledge that they had already touched me. Mara's absence was palpable. Her workstation was empty, the stool overturned where she'd pushed away in panic. She hadn't said goodbye, only whispered something like, "Never again," as she fled up the stairwell. I couldn't blame her. When the room was orderly, I sat at the computer to file the official report. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. The system prompts were banal. Case number: decedent unknown male. Age approximately 40-50. Cause of death. My training took over. Probable freshwater drowning with blunt chest trauma secondary to structural collapse, I typed. Autopsy findings: waterlogged lungs, fractured ribs, hepatic laceration. Standard language flowed easily, the kind you use when truth must survive legal scrutiny. I added a note about possible postmortem muscle artifact during dissection, citing electrical interference from storm power fluctuations. I wrote that the unusual movements were non-viable tissue spasms triggered by environmental conditions. Lies, but lies wrapped in the armor of technical jargon. I paused, staring at the blinking cursor. This was how truth dies in medicine, quietly, clinically, without ceremony. Mara's badge still hung on its hook. She'd refused to sign the assistance section of the report, just shook her head and walked out soaked to the knees. "I'm not part of this," she'd said, voice trembling. Then the stairwell swallowed her. I wrote her name anyway, unsigned. When the report was done, I opened my private logbook. the one no one else sees. The sketch I made trembled under my hand. A heart reaching, vessels questing, a silhouette of a man half born on stainless steel. Beneath it, I wrote a single line in shaky print. The body refused death. That was all I could manage. Anything more felt like an invitation for the memory to reach back. For 18 years, I built my life on the certainty that death was the final system failure. Cells die, membranes rupture, energy drains away. I stood in hundreds of courtrooms, sworn in as an expert witness, calmly explaining why a body could not fight back. I believed it so completely, I stopped fearing the dead entirely. Now I know better. I called the county administrator later that morning and resigned. Budget cuts made it easy. No one begged me to stay. I gave no real explanation beyond health and safety concerns and burnout. Words that mean nothing but close doors quietly. Packing my locker felt surreal. Classical CDs, old gloves, spare lab coat, my mug, still damp from the night before. Each object was a fragment of the man I was. The man who trusted the stillness of bodies. I zipped them into a bag and tried not to look back at the table. Before I left, I zipped the decedent into a fresh black bag. As the teeth of the zipper passed the heart, I felt, or thought I felt, a faint flutter beneath the vinyl. Reflex made me freeze. I stared at the bag. It didn't move again. After a long moment, I pulled the zipper closed and forced a whisper through clenched teeth. "Stay dead." It felt like a prayer, though I don't pray. I shut off the lights on my way out. The pumps hummed behind me, steady and tireless, pushing back the flood. Yet as I climbed the stairs and stepped into grey Midwestern daylight, I knew something had already broken loose. In the world, or in me? Perhaps both. I spent 18 years proving death was certain. One night proved me wrong, and I haven't trusted stillness since.